Everyone's saying that Merab Dvalishvili is the bantamweight GOAT, but none of these people have any clue what on earth they're talking about. It is the height of delusion, the ultimate expression of recency bias, and let me explain to you why exactly that is. I swear there is a direct inverse relationship between how much someone gets paid to talk about MMA and how seriously their opinion ought be taken. Because from MMA content creators to UFC analysts and commentators, everyone is saying that it is an indisputable fact that there is no debate with respect to the notion that Merab is the bantamweight GOAT. But this is absolutely untenable. Let's look at a variety of criteria because none of these people ever mention a single criterion by which to judge a GOAT. All they ever do is just assert it. They might say one or two little factors here and there, but there's nothing ever sophisticated. And I'm not going to offer you some extraordinarily comprehensive case for why Dominic Cruz, for example, is the bantamweight GOAT as opposed to Merab. But we're going to look at things in much more depth than any of these guys ever offer. So the four supposed bantamweight GOAT candidates are Merab Dvalishvili, Aljamain Sterling, TJ Dillashaw, and Dominic Cruz. Recall that Aljo was being hyped up to be the bantamweight GOAT when he was the champion. Do you see a trend? Merab all of a sudden has a single title defense, and they're talking about him as the bantamweight GOAT. They did the exact same thing with Aljamain Sterling. But let's carry on. So number one, let's look at Merab. How many top 10 wins does he have? That is, how many wins does he have over top 10 competition? The answer is 6, starting with Marlon Moraes, going all the way up to his win over Umar this weekend. So we have Jose Aldo, Peter Yan, Henry Cejudo, and then Sean O'Malley. Okay. How many title fight wins does he have? The answer is 2. How long has his reign been at the top of the division? The answer is under 6 months. Another thing, what is the combined record of his wins over these top 10 ranked competition or fighters? The answer is 122 wins and 23 losses. That is the combined record of Marlon Moraes all the way to Umar Nurmagomedov. And that makes for a 5.3 to 1 win-loss ratio, which is also an 81.1% win rate. All right, let's move on to Aljamain Sterling. Top 10 wins, 6. It is tied with Merab. Title fight wins, 4. We're going off the official record. We'll go into a little bit some of the controversial details that are very relevant later, but let's just pass through it quickly, and then we'll jump into some of the nitty-gritty a little bit. So title fight wins, 4. Compare that to Merab's 2. All right, time of reign, roughly 2 years. Compare that to, again, roughly 6, not even 6 months of Merab. Top 10 competition, the combined record is going to be 94-13, which makes for a 7.2 win-to-loss ratio, or a 86.2% win rate of his competition, at least top 10 win competition. Compare that to, again, the 81.1% or 5.3 win-to-loss ratio. All right, moving on to TJ Dillashaw. Top 10 wins, 7. Compare that to Aljo 6 and Merab 6. Title fight wins, 5. Compare that to Aljo's 4 and Merab's 2. Time of reign, roughly 2 years, which is about the same as Aljamain's, and that is 4 times the amount of Merab's. Top 10, or the combined record, is going to be 152-17, which is crazy. I'm excluding Joe Soto there for a moment. If we include Joe Soto, it's going to be 167-19. But on the former, it's going to be a 8.9 to 1 win-to-loss ratio, and then an 88.8% win rate. And when you include Joe Soto, it's roughly identical. It's near about identical because he was 15-2 going into the Dillashaw fight. I'm excluding him because of all the circumstances surrounding his fight with TJ. Was taken on less than 24 hours notice. He's a flyweight. He's not really a bantamweight. All that jazz. And he wasn't ranked in the bantamweight division. So I don't even know if, well, he may have been ranked in the top 10 at flyweight at that time, insofar as I recall. But let's move on now to Dominic Cruz. So far, TJ is winning on top 10 wins, on title fight wins. He's tied for first with Aljo on time of reign, and then the combined record is more impressive than both Aljo's and especially Merab's. Merab's is actually the lowest on every single metric. Let's move on. Dominic Cruz, top 10 wins, 11. Three of those, are when he was not the champion. So as a contender, the first time as a contender against Ian McCall, against Joseph Benavidez, the first fight, and then also against Pedro Munoz, who most ranking systems had Pedro Munoz in December of 2021 in the top 10 of the bantamweight division at that time. Not all of them, but the overwhelming majority. You can check that if you are skeptical. There are a variety of websites you can go to. Title fight wins 7. Compare that to TJ's 5, Aljo's 4, and Merab's 2. All right, time of reign, this one's a little bit tricky with Dominick Cruz because of his injuries, right? So if we're excluding the years that he was inactive, which I think is absolutely fair to do, if not the proper thing to do, then we have a total of roughly 3 years. If we include that, it'll be 6 years. It doesn't matter because both of them are superior to every other person thus far. TJ's 2, Aljo's 2, and then Merab's less than 6 months. Okay, so Cruz is winning on 3 very relevant criteria. Then we have the combined records. Okay, so this one, he doesn't have the best one on. So the combined record of Dominick Cruz's top 10 competition is 164 wins and 33 losses. I'm just brushing aside no contest and draws. There was not a single no contest, but there were a couple draws here and there across the board, but who cares? So that makes for a 5-to-1 win-to-loss ratio and an 80% win rate. That so far is actually the lowest of the 4 GOAT candidates, but it's only 1% lower, 1.1% lower than Merab's. It is 8.6% lower than TJ's. So TJ wins on that criterion, but Dominick Cruz wins on every other criterion that we've assessed thus far. Top 10 wins, title fight wins, time of reign, and then the fourth one obviously being the combined record of the opponent. Obviously, that's not the only thing you can go to with respect to evaluating the level of competition, but it is one of the most relevant things that you can quantify. So let's look at something else, which is the level of dominance in their wins against these opponents. Someone like, take for instance, Aljamain choking out Corey Sandhagen, which should have been a title fight, honestly. But that's just my opinion. That is absolutely crazy, the way that he dominated Corey Sandhagen. When we look at Merab, his wins versus Umar, his win versus Umar, his win versus Sean O'Malley, his win versus Jose Aldo, are these extraordinarily dominant performances? No, they're not at all. He barely beat Umar, and then he 3-2 decision in a close round at the end there as well until he landed that sick combo. So good for him. But again, 3-2 decision against Sean O'Malley. And then Jose Aldo, I think that was a 2-1 decision. But even then, that itself, if I recall correctly, was a fairly controversial decision in and of itself because it comes down to how, your philosophy of judging a fight in the first place. Because all he did was just hold him up against the cage. Compare that to the level of dominance that Dominick Cruz exhibited in his wins. For the most part, Cruz is pitching shutouts when he's fighting and winning against these top 10 fighters. That's just not at all the case with Merab. DJ didn't win a single round against Dominick Cruz. So that's another criterion by which Dominick Cruz holds over Merab. But when we think of greatness, this is, I think, one of the most important points. I got 30 seconds here. When we think of greatness, we think of great making moments, and who has the greatest comeback of all time in the history of the sport? It's Dominick Cruz, who tore his ACL, had to have 2 surgeries on his ACL, tore his groin, and then tore his other ACL, and was out for years, came back, and still beat the champion 5 years later with a contender in the middle. Dude, that's absolutely insane. One of the most inspiring things in the history of the sport, and that's why, among all the other reasons, he is undisputably the greatest bantamweight of all time.